know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction. Wanna bet? What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
On our last episode, we asked the viewers and the listeners if they would be cool with a few more extra shows as we approach the trade deadline. I believe we're about 2 weeks away. We're not more than 2 weeks away, are we? We're 2 weeks.
2 weeks in a day, bud.
2 weeks in a day. Jeez.
2 weeks Friday.
Yeah, jeez. Well, of course you would know that.
And that's why I started this episode being very rude and on my phone, just because there's a lot of action on the Google Pixel these days.
I never take offense to you being on the phone. You're doing your job. And if it means we get to break another trade, like, I'm down for that.
Let it be said, I'm not scrolling the gram or anything. You know, I'm not like.
Well,
whipping.
that's nice.
It's just keeping the lines, keeping them fresh, keeping them hot.
Anyway, we are going to have a podcast on Saturday because there's a lot of news and a lot of opportunities for Siege to check his phone and make sure the NHL, the hot stove continues to deliver. So Saturday.
Plus, we just found out we get paid a premium for working weekends here. Adam Wild, it's got a little shift bonus there for doing the Saturday show.
I will put that in my invoice. Yes. Anyway, that's the big news to start off the show. Saturday, we will have a podcast. This coming Saturday, we will have a podcast. And we're going to deal with all the trade stuff. We're going to deal with some trade stuff today. But we are definitely going to make that our focus. The very first player I want to mention, because there's a handful of players we're going to mention. Patrick Kane. The Hawks were in Toronto last night. A lot of people wanted to hear from Kane after the game. They did not get their wish. But also, people are wondering, what if Patrick Kane decides to wear a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey? What if a deal could be consummated between those two teams? Or just, at this point, does Patrick Kane even want to be traded? CJ, tell us everything we need to know when it comes to Patrick Kane.
Well, I think the question needs to be flipped around. Like, do the Toronto Maple Leafs want Patrick Kane?
Oh,
and this isn't
interesting.
And look, I'm not throwing any shade at Patrick Kane. His career speaks for itself. Probably the greatest American player in NHL history. Certainly,
I don't even think you have to add probably.
Certainly squarely in that conversation. If you want to make a case for Mike Modano or maybe, I don't know where Brett Hall, he was born in Canada. Does he count? Anyway, point is, one of the greatest American players ever to play the game, 3-time Stanley Cup winner, but he's not having a great year, man. And, to see him play these two games this week in Montreal on Tuesday, Toronto on Wednesday, like the magic isn't there. I know that he's personally tried to downplay the hip issue he's dealing with, but it's hard not to watch him and just wonder, what percentage he's at. We know about his cap hit. I just don't see the fit in Toronto. Like, I don't see them doing it. I don't know what he's going to do just yet, but we're days away. Like, I don't think this is going to go on for too much longer before we have an indication if he's willing to be moved or not. And, he and his agent, Pat Brisson, are targeting early next week, mid next week to I think at least be able to give Chicago management an indication of if he would waive and maybe where he would go, and then see if they can work something out. But, I think we're facing the possibility he doesn't move at all. We'll have to see. We saw the emotion when he spoke last week after the Tarasenko deal went down. I wonder if the Rangers can still get involved. I've seen Puckpedia has put out a couple tweets in the last few days, sort of detailing, how they could fit his cap in. So certainly they can do it from a cap perspective. I think there might be a little bit of hope there that maybe the Rangers is still an option for him, but I don't see the Leafs committing whatever cap space they have to Patrick Kane. Now, I'll eat my words. I'll eat my shoe if I'm wrong on this one, because that's more of a feel thing than specific information. But I love the idea of it. Like the idea of pairing him and Matthews, it's not a hard sell, right? It could be, don't know if you remember years ago, one of my favorite games. I went to a lot of games over the years, but the game in Chicago where him and Matthews went back and forth at the end of the game. Do you remember that? And Austin's like doing this, and it was like a wrestling match.
I love stuff like that.
Well, it was, first of all, it was one of the more dramatic regular season games I've ever been to. I think it ended up 6-5 with all kinds of goals at the end, and those guys doing that. And I actually went in the Chicago dressing room afterwards and asked Kane about it, and he was like legit in the moment, like kind of like he felt like he was being disrespected by the young star at the time. Like, again, that was in the sort of the heat of when it just happened. Like, I think over time those guys look back on that and they think it's cool now too. But yeah, so I could see the storyline and the big name. I don't know if the fit's there. Honestly, it just might not be the right time in Kane's career, the right, cap number attached to him, and might not be right for the Leafs. I mean, they have a pretty good right winger named Mitch Marner, who does a lot of what Patrick Kane did in his prime, but he's doing it today. And so I'm not sure that's the element they need either, especially with Kane's health, being a bit of a question.
Also, if Patrick Kane joins the Toronto Maple Leafs, the storyline I would care about the most is who gets to wear number 88. Probably Kane, but like that would be really funny.
Well, I don't know. Would Nylander give that up? Like it's a
great question.
I'm pretty sure he wears it in ode to Kane. Like, I think Kane was like his guy as a kid. I mean, Kane was Matthews' guy as a kid too. Like it would be kind of cool. Like if you're into sort of the storytelling and the romance of sports, I don't want to be the one to pour cold water here, but I'm just looking at the cold light of day. He's not. I just don't know if he's the difference maker he once was. And again, he might just be limited by his health. He had 90+ point season last year. So it's not like he's totally washed necessarily, but I just doesn't feel like this is lining up for this year anyway. I mean, maybe he gets healthy, maybe as a free agent. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go. And there's still no clear indication he wants to leave Chicago either. So I guess we'll see how this develops. But right at this point in time, I think it's not very likely that we see Patrick Kane in a Leaf sweater this season.
I wonder with his hip. I wonder with the fact that the team that he's on is very bad, if that plays into his motivations. Because I was making this point on another podcast earlier this week. Like the idea, even if he is a little past his prime, like the idea that arguably the greatest American-born player could be available for trade, like that should be a much bigger deal. I get that like Timo Meier is probably the top prize ahead of the deadline. I get that when Horvat was available, we hyped him up too. But like it's just kind of funny that like Patrick Kane has been kind of brought back in terms of the status of players who are available as kind of like sort of a bit of an afterthought. That's just how I feel about it as somebody who obviously, cares about the deadline and cares about the stories attached to it. But like maybe if it was a little bit healthier, like I think people would be I think fans and I think people would be a little bit more excited about the idea that like, oh, whoa, like a team could try to go for Patrick Kane. Like we talk about trying to drive up excitement for the league all the time. Like this is something we would be hyping up more, but like, the injuries, the lack of forecheck, his defensive metrics, like that takes from it.
Well, and let's imagine a world where he came through Montreal and Toronto on back-to-back nights and put up like 3 points in each game, and it's 2 weeks out from the deadline. And obviously this part of the world, there's a lot of hockey voices and there'd be hype around that. Like that, it could be totally different.
Absolutely.
But there is this feeling, even from other teams, like other people I speak to in other front offices, there's just this notion he's not healthy. And so I recognize for him, he's going to have to satisfy likely if he does waive his no move clause and decide to go somewhere, he's going to have to prove that health or give the team his word. An interesting note, actually, I didn't know this of all things, but NHL trades by and large are not subject to a physical. So just in talking with someone in the front office this week, he's explaining that on the trade call, typically the league will say like, is this player healthy? And the assistant GM or the GM, whoever's doing the call, will say yes. And it's kind of at your word. But just because of the logistics of being in season, like there's not an ability to have players do an independent medical review, before announcing a trade. So it's kind of interesting because we saw it in the baseball offseason, right? Was it Correa that ended up signing for 3 teams as a free agent?
Carlos Correa went through that. Gary Payton II went through a weird thing in the NBA too.
Right. But in the NHL, it's a bit more of like, you have to give your word on a player. But, and teams are reluctant to share the medical file of a player before they've traded him because they might not trade him to that team. And then all of a sudden that team and sort of the marketplace has access to the file and there might be other things going on. So, anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but it's just kind of, it's relevant, I think, in the Kane situation. It's relevant in the Jakob Chychrun situation, just given
absolutely
how much injury history Chychrun has. And I think, honestly, if he hadn't have had the injuries he's had in his career, I'm talking about Chychrun now, this deal would have been done a year ago. Like, I think that's part of what's held this up. I mean, part of it, of course, is the Coyotes have not, moved off a high ask for him, but it's also that there's concern about, his durability and if you make a big trade for him, like, is he going to be able to play 70 games or is it going to be 40, in a season? So, health does play a factor at the deadline too. And so, yeah, I don't know. I got a bad feeling with the Kane thing. I don't want to make any, I'll tell you this, when he was upset after the Rangers deal didn't go down, that actually made me start to get like, okay, this guy wants to play. Like, this guy wants the magic, right? He wants one more crack at this. But I'm not so sure now where his head's at. Hopefully we'll get some clarity there. I love the answer, by the way. I don't know if you heard, Austin Matthews was asked about Kane, before the game in Toronto, and was saying, like, he said, yeah, it would be weird to see him in another team sweater, but he's like, it's also been weird not to see him in the playoffs.
I saw that.
Because it's been a long time. I mean, I know that Chicago made it into the bubble playoffs. Let's just discount that because it's not the same thing. It's been a long time since we've seen these top players of Chicago get a real chance to win anything. And so almost selfishly, you kind of like to see both he and Jonathan Taves back playing in those big games, but I'm not sure the stars are aligning for it.
I'm not sure either. We'll have to wait and see. 2 weeks and a day until the trade deadline. We'll have more updates as we go on with the show. But first, it's time for You Can Bet That.
You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Brought to you by Sports Interaction. Get in the action and make a play. 19 plus. Please play responsibly.
Welcome to another edition of You Can Bet That with David Bastel. Remember to hit sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. DB, what's going down?
Not much. Let's talk some trade deadline because I know you guys are all over it, and we're about 2 weeks away from it.
We almost forgot that was happening.
Yeah. You of all people, right?
Yeah, you of all people, Siege. Yeah. For the deadline, you are able to make some picks on where some of the bigger names who could be moved ahead of the deadline could go. Let's start with a name on a lot of people's minds right now. Well, both names we're going to get to on everyone's minds right now, but let's start with Jakob Chychrun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I threw this name out there just because, and, CJ's been talking about this for the last little while too, about how the Coyotes have actually been holding him out of the game and have told everybody about it, that he's not playing because he's being traded, which we really haven't heard too much of in past times. I know there's been times where it's like, yeah, we kind of nudge, wink, wink, know that this guy is going to be held up, but 2 weeks in advance, that's a lot of time, guys. So right now, Sports Interaction is deeming the Los Angeles Kings as the favorites to land Chychrun. The Bruins are in that conversation. The Flames are in that conversation. But according to the numbers, CJ, the Kings are the team. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that one.
Well, I agree that they should be the favorite. But what's interesting, as you mentioned, the fact he's now, 5-6 days into being held out, it tells you there's not a deal yet. And, that's, a lot of people we saw last Saturday night when he's out for trade related reasons. The Coyotes penned that one too. That's a new term that they've trademarked. You expect almost a trade's going to happen right away, but this is a bit of a jump ball for me. And so it's interesting that there's other teams there, because I really can't tell you where this one's going to go. Not that I know for sure anywhere else, but
sure.
Typically you have a strong inclination or indication, where a player might end up. Chychrun, I mean, he's been available for so long. The Kings have had consistent interest, but maybe someone else swoops in and gets him.
So we go from Jakob Chychrun to Timo Meier, DB. Where does he end up?
You know what? I threw this name in there because it's most lists number one player, 30 goal scorer, has that year, that option next year, and so forth. And the Devils seem to be the favorites here at Sports Interaction. You can put in the conversation the Hurricanes, even the Jets are drawing some interest as well, just because there are some connections with the Jets team. I'm hoping this happens personally because I'd love to see Ehlers and Meier back together again. But the Leafs are in the conversation. The Knights seem to be on in everything, as you know, CJ. I'm guessing the prized possession of this year's trade deadline could be Timo Meier.
Absolutely. I think just because he's not a rental player, I mean, much like Jacob Chychrun, and the season he's having, and the fact that all the teams you're mentioning here, they all make sense because they're all teams trying to win a Stanley Cup right now, and it's not every season that the contenders can add this kind of piece. Just some unique circumstances have made him available, and I think all those teams should be in on him, quite frankly. And this is a real difference maker, right? I mean, no, and with respect to the other players that are moved at the deadline, often it's kind of window dressing. I think this fundamentally can shift a team getting Timo Meier.
DB, how do you think the Jets could handle that $10 million qualifying offer from Timo Meier?
Well, that's an issue. They do have some money under the cap, as you guys know, and there's a lot of talk that, excuse me, Pierre-Luc Dubois may not be there next year, so it lifts a little off the book. It almost makes sense from, and I know he's not a center iceman, which would be ideal for the Jets. One comes in, one comes out, but if Dubois leaves, they come to some sort of an agreement. I'd like to see term more than just that 1 year kind of thing. Like if it's a 5 times 8 or something of that nature, 5 times 9, and then keep him in the fold. Him and Ehlers, as you guys know, in the queue, made magic. And I don't have to tell you, both of those players are still making magic in the NHL, and put them at this level. CJ said it bang on too. 26 years old. This guy here has like 8 years ahead of him, maybe a little bit more depending on conditioning and all that kind of thing that happens in the mid 30s. But man, this is a showcase piece, and that's why you see a lot of people interested, and it's going to cost you a lot. But you know what? Is it going to be worth the price? Time will tell.
Time will tell indeed. And that concludes the inaugural edition of Jets Corner with David Bastel. And
I'll be back next week.
Yes. And also for You Can Bet That, don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. We'll talk again soon, DB.
Be well.
These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. As someone who has had many a job, going to LinkedIn is a pretty big place for me to find those opportunities when I really needed them. So I can imagine if you are on the other side trying to post those jobs, LinkedIn Jobs should be the spot for you. All you have to do, you add your job, add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and to hire. We're at the beginning of 2023, that first quarter of the year. Get those employees in so that way you can finish strong for the end of the year by getting the right team member, getting some synergy in. Synergy is a really cool buzzword for a lot of these companies that are going to be hiring up on LinkedIn Jobs. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1, not number 2, not number 3, none of that. Number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/Johnston. It's linkedin.com/Johnston to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Siege, by the way, are you how much are you looking forward to doing Trade Center with the boys this year?
I'm pretty pumped. I mean, it's sort of like a day. I think when you finally get there, it's just like you enjoy it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's sort of some anxiety in the buildup. I'm getting a little better with that, getting older and not putting as much pressure on myself and just realizing you just do what you do. And I don't know, they keep having me back. So like it's been all right. I think I did 7 or 8 trade deadlines at Sportsnet, and now this will be my second at TSN. So plus all the July 1st shows, which are kind of the same thing, a little different feel on July 1st because, vacation starting on the other side of it. And it's just not as stressful. And, quite honestly, we do typically have a handle on where everyone's going to sign. Not everyone, but a lot of the deals are sort of, you kind of have a feeling where it's going. Whereas, sometimes with the trade day, stuff comes out of left field. Do you know how close it is though? I literally just got this email. Like this is real time from TSN. They're so organized there with my options for food. Like you have to send it. So for breakfast, there's 4 options: breakfast sandwich, home fries, and juice. A big breakfast with juice. I'm not sure what's in that. Pancakes with sausage and juice, or the slightly healthier option of muffin, yogurt parfait, fruit cup, and juice.
So you get juice with all of these. What if you don't like juice?
Well, you don't have to drink it. I guess you just
I guess, but
keep in mind there's coffee and water there all the time.
Yeah, of course.
And then lunch. So I'll probably go breakfast sandwich. I feel like you can't really go wrong with a breakfast sandwich.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, I'm going to be going in the studio. So the Leafs play the night before, actually in Calgary, and that's a TSN broadcast. So that game probably doesn't start, I'm just going to guess, until 9 or 9:30 Eastern time. And
I could pull up the time right now. So 7 p.m. my time.
Yeah, so 9 p.m. Eastern.
Correct.
And so me, Pierre LeBrun, and Darren Dreger will be in studio for that game, just obviously to do hits if anything breaks or what have you. And then so it's a fairly late night, and then I think we're probably back at like 6:30 or something the next morning. So my point is I'm gonna be ready for a breakfast sandwich. I'm not complaining about that. It's just a fact. I mean, do you know what's really hardcore? My buddy Mark Masters, who works for TSN, is going to the game in Calgary. So he's physically on the road there. I think he's flying out at 11 that night. He might not even be able to see the end of the game to get to Vancouver so that he can do hits at like 5:30 Vancouver time the next morning. So
why do they have him doing Vancouver hits? What about
that's where the Leafs will be at that time?
Right. Makes sense.
So I'm just saying, like, there's lots of people that aren't sleeping much those days. That's my point. Mark Masters, no one works harder than that guy.
Yeah, so that's true. I've heard a lot about that guy.
Yeah, so I'm just saying a breakfast sandwich. I'm gonna need a little comfort food, is all I'm saying at that moment, I think. And then
give us every pick you're gonna make.
Well, and then so the lunch options, you got the pulled beef with kettle chips and coleslaw.
Ooh.
The chicken souvlaki bowl.
Yes.
The lemon tahini falafel bowl. A buffalo ranch wrap with either fries or salad. Or you can just get a salad with chicken.
This is a boring last option. Probably healthier, but like a boring last option.
I love that both times they just put the boring healthy option at the bottom. It's like, we know one of you, a few of my colleagues are probably health conscious, but
someone's gonna do it. Someone has to do it.
I mean, look,
juice.
We got like some former players. I can't even say who's coming on, I don't think yet. I'm not sure it's been announced, but we got some good talent in studio, put it that way. It should be fun.
Are we gonna have llamas? Are we gonna have alpacas? Is the shirt gun coming back?
I would imagine some version of that stuff is happening. But
you got to get involved in one of those skits this year, man. Last year I was watching the broadcast and I was waiting to see if you're going to be in any of those like Tradie Bunch sketches. Like, please put yourself in one of them.
Well, I don't get say on that, right?
Make yourself look like a fool for once.
Do you remember last year we did like the football, like Chris Johnson, Ryerson University or whatever?
Yeah,
Insider.
Like
we did like the football headshot thing.
Come on, man. I want you to be more of a central character this year.
We're 2 years into this podcast. You know that I do not take myself too seriously.
Thank God you don't.
I would do any of those things. Anyway, we're way off the mark here, but
no, we're not. We're talking about Trade Center. That's part of it.
I don't know what my lunch option is. Maybe the pulled beef. I don't know. I've got a week. I got a week to submit this, so I can think about my choice for a week before sending it in.
You should let the audience pick your meals, like crowdsource each of the options, like put them out there and let people pick. You should do it. What would you do if you were?
I will crowdsource the lunch. I'm all in on the breakfast sandwich. Like I'm already excited for the breakfast sandwich 2 weeks and 1 day out.
Please, okay. At the very least with lunch, list out the options and then have people in the comments be like, hey,
that's actually a great idea. I'm gonna do a Twitter poll.
Yes, do that. Let's do that.
You think I'll anger anyone at TSN by revealing our lunch options or
no? Like,
Okay.
who cares? You didn't
I
say
don't know.
like, yeah, no.
Not a state secret. Like, it's not
It's
like
a
I came out
lunch
here.
option.
It's not like I came on this pod and just told you everyone who's going to be part of the show because I can't do that yet.
Look, I know Bell. I'm a former Bell Media employee. I get it. A lot of people don't like Bell. I don't think they're so bad that they would get mad at you for revealing what you want for lunch.
No, and they've been great to me. And I'm not just saying that. They've been I've loved working there, and I'm actually pumped for Trade Center. Like, it's a fun day. As I say, sometimes it's this build-up point. Like yesterday, for whatever reason, I kind of hit my breaking point a little bit.
Oh, really?
Not like nothing bad. I'm sorry. This isn't a cry for help or anything, but it's just more like I just got to a point. It's just like so many radio hits, so much, it's a lot. But now even today, I'm already like, okay, 2 weeks, I can do this. Charge to the finish.
Well,
Yeah.
it just at the very least, like, we're here for you, buddy. I hope you know that.
Oh yeah, of course. It's just sort of like it's an exercise in patience, kind of, because everyone wants. Like, it's what you're going to ask me after this. We move on from this part of the segment. You're going to say, like, who's going to where and what's happening? Like, you're trying to figure it all out. But sometimes the truth is you're just not going to know for 2 weeks.
Well, we have to at least act like we know what we're talking about.
Well, we do to a certain degree, but there's mystery out there, right? And the truth is, we might think this player's going to some team, but then there could be an offer we don't see coming. There could still be an injury, right? There could still be something that changes a team's circumstances. That maybe a team that isn't on the radar for some of these top players all of a sudden has more cap space. I mean, that's what happened in Vegas with the Mark Stone injury. Certainly don't wish that on any players or organizations, but that kind of thing can come up in the next 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden we got all these players being held out for trade related reasons. Like, are these guys just going to sit for 2 weeks? Like, I don't know how that's going to go.
Imagine if San Jose starts doing that with Timo Meier, because we already have Vladislav Gavrikov in Columbus doing it. Jacob Chychrun, obviously everyone knows that. Well, how long until San Jose does it?
Right. Or, you have other players too, like, James Van Riemsdyk, just all these sort of veteran players on teams that are kind of playing games that don't matter a lot in the standings for them. I think that, and these players are big assets, especially the guys near the top of the trade boards. Like, they're going to get decent returns by and large. I wonder about the Kane return. It's one thing we didn't touch on in the opening, but I don't know that Chicago's in a position, even as big a name as he is and all that sort of stuff. His actual salary is quite low too. So that actually makes it palatable. But I just wonder if, with him basically controlling where he goes, if he gives them one place and there's no real bidding, like, I wonder if the return on him will be much lower than what you'd expect. Like, sounds strange, but I could see the return on him being lower than the Tarasenko return, just because, St. Louis could have traded Tarasenko. I mean, he had a no trade clause, but I think there was more teams he was probably willing to go to. And so there's more of a market there. Just it's an interesting dynamic. I'll put it that way with the Kane and Taves, because of what they mean to that franchise, because of their cap hits, because of their no movement clauses. Like, it's not a true bidding war.
We didn't even really touch off on, we didn't at all with Jonathan Toews in the opening segment, who his name, I mean, once upon a time, he may have been the best forward in the game. And that's another name that's, like, seriously, like, quiet, right? Like, I mean, obviously the production's not there, but, like, two of the best players of the last, like, decade. And they're I don't want to say they're washed, but, like, they're available, and, they're obviously not the primary names to care about.
Well, and they both, you're like, do they just want to be career Blackhawks? Like, is that, I mean, it could be in their mind. They've had so much success. I mean, they're going to put statues of those guys out front of the United Center, as well they should. They completely changed the face of a franchise, won 3 Stanley Cups together, came into the league together. Like they're sort of inextricably linked. And here they are, sort of at what appears to be the end of the road. I mean, who knows? Maybe Patrick Kane gets healthy and plays 3 or 4 more years. Like, that guy seems to love the game. Like, I don't see any reason why that couldn't, as long as health is there, I can't see him going away. I don't know where Taves is at. Like, he hasn't been with the team for the last week, coming out of the All-Star break and bye week. He hasn't played. He's had, they said, a non-COVID related illness. He's on IR right now. Like, I don't know where his mind's at. And remember, he already sat out 1 full season. So I don't know. I don't know how much gas is left in the tank. I mean, we had DB on wouldn't he look good in Winnipeg, his hometown? I mean, wouldn't that be
That was a
again
great segment with TV.
if we're into the romance stuff, like the Kane and Matthews idea, like what about Jonathan Taves, playing playoff games in Winnipeg? I don't think it's going to happen, but if we wanted to dream up kind of a fairy tale ending, there's one. I wonder about Colorado's certainly had some interest in Taves. Like, is that a place he'd waive for? I don't know, but we're going to know within day. Like, I don't think this goes on. I doubt we're doing the pod the day before the deadline and we're still saying what's going to happen with these guys. I think it's going to be clear one way or the other, what direction they're going.
What about with Timo Meier? Is he a guy who we are probably going to wait until the very end for? Where do you see that going?
I think it's going to be done sooner, actually. There's a fair amount of interest in him. And you haven't this is a dynamic I haven't seen many people talking about, but you have two of the best teams in the Metro Division, Carolina and New Jersey, as I would say the teams with principal interest that have the assets able to make that kind of deal work. And so, of course, Toronto's there with interest. I've heard, some notion that Vegas might be around the situation too. But, those teams are highly incentivized not only to add him to their current team, but to not see him go to a division rival. And keep in mind, the Metro is all of a sudden pretty spicy because you've got Tarasenko with the Rangers now. That's a hotly competed for division. And so, I think that probably gets done sooner. I know there's maybe a bit of frustration. Like, we're in the stages where these GMs are speaking to Mike Greer almost on a daily basis and you're kind of grinding over, details. So it's, I guess there's a world that goes on and on and on, but I think there's enough interest to suggest that deal gets done, maybe even soon, like not going right to the March 3rd deadline. I wonder the same about Chychrun. Someone who works in another front office was telling me like he thinks the Meier and Chychrun situations are kind of holding up the rest of the league because obviously any of these top teams say that wants a Timo Meier. Well, if they don't get him, they get to pivot and go for maybe some lesser lights on the market. It's similar with on the D end of things. And so if we get trades with either of those players, it might break open the dam and James Duthie will be crying in his sleep because all of a sudden then you're getting to again, there's just a possibility. I know we say this sort of thing every year, but there is a possibility a lot of the big action has happened before March 3rd. You already have players. Chychrun and Gavrikov are both on the top 10, I think, of any trade list you might see out there, whether it's the one I do at North Star Bets or TSN's Trade Bait or Frank Cervalli's list at Daily Faceoff. Like those are already two of the top 10.
Athletic has one too.
Right. Sorry, I'm not purposely excluding anyone. All I'm saying is I bet if you go look at any of those lists, that these are both top 10 pieces on anyone's list, and they're already not playing games 2 weeks out. As I already said, Meier probably is on top of all those lists. I know he's the top of my big board at North Star Bets right now. So, and he could move early. We've already had Horvat move. We've already had Tarasenko move. Those guys were top 10, top 5, on those lists. So yeah, the dominoes are falling a little bit too early for those that have 10 hours of live TV booked on March 3rd. But at least we're going to have good snacks and good food.
But at the very least with Gavrikov and Chychrun, them being held out for games for trade related reasons, at least for a week, like we should be inclined. I mean, you're saying Meier should be soon, like Chychrun and Gavrikov should be sooner than Meier, if anything, right?
Who knows? I mean, this
knows?
Well, you would think, yes, but like the Chychrun situation has gone on so long. Like, how do we?
Yeah.
Where are we even handicapping it at this point? It sounded like there was a deal that was pretty close with LA and it didn't get completed. And, now you're kind of in the abyss where, again, I was told as of, Wednesday, we're recording this Thursday morning, that there just was nothing there. It's not, again, they're not just pushing this across the line. And then, there's obviously other teams that are hanging around to see what they might do. I do think there's legitimate interest from LA's end in Vejmelka as well. And so that's, if that happens where they were getting Chychrun and Vejmelka, we're looking probably at a pretty large deal with moving pieces. So that might take some time. So I could see that dragging on. Gavrikov, the question for me is anyone really going to step up and pay those prices for a rental? I'm not saying they won't. I know there's a lot of teams that like him. It's just, it's a it's a lot to wrap your mind around for, you know, second pairing defenseman who's probably walking away at the end of the season. It, you know, it would be a bold call by whichever team ends up doing that if they do. And then so who knows? Maybe Meier, the Meier domino might drop before those 2D. I don't think it's impossible.
I'm trying to remember the specific return that's been out there for Vladislav Gavrikov.
I reported Tuesday on Insider Trading, a first, a third, and a fourth is the ask.
Like, that's so much. It's so much. No respect to Vlad, but like, that's a lot.
It's the market is driven by demand. How many players are like him? Like, there's not a lot of him out there. And I just think there are contending teams. Look, obviously no one stepped up to pay it, or I think the deal would be done today. So maybe it's a grind down. Maybe it ends up being a first and a third. Like you get one of the picks shaved off. You know, obviously I think a first, a third, and a fourth is getting him with 50% retention. So one of those picks is probably attached to the fact that they're keeping salary back. Let's see what happens, bud. This is, I mean, it's like if you've ever negotiated on everything, you gotta ask for a lot. If they don't ask for a first, a third, and a fourth, they're never getting a first, a third, and a fourth.
That's fair. Any other things we should keep in mind with regards to anyone who could be available for trade? Anyone else any other nugget in your head that you wanna let the people know?
There's nothing right now. But I'm excited that we're back on Saturday because, you know, everything moves so fast. This is like the funny thing. Like every day you wake up and I don't know where the stories are going to go kind of thing, or like where the conversations are going to go. Like there's a lot out there now, and, you know, it's getting fun. Honestly, this last week has been pretty fun. I said, I acknowledge that I hit a bit of a breaking point on Wednesday night, but other than that, there's a lot more talk, and it, you know, the market, the deadline does force movement, right? It forces decisions. Like 6 or 7 weeks ago, when you're asking people like what their plans are, it's like, wow, we got to wait. We got to see. Now it's like, okay, now we got to actually make decisions. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in Calgary, Julian. I think that it's an intriguing,
you and me both.
Intriguing deadline. Like my sense is that the front office is not sold that they should be giving up assets to be big buyers right now. Like I think there's a lot of questions, concern, whatever you want to call it, about the team, like whether it's just smart to do that, or, you know, look at Nashville. They're in a similar spot. I mean, even worse, I'd say, given that there's some distance between them and the playoff spot. I don't necessarily think they're selling, but maybe they just punt on this year, you know what I mean? And regroup. I think Washington is another team that, like, they would like a D, but, you know, is it worth it? You know, they've had terrible injury luck this year. You know, so there's a lot of teams that are now going to be forced to make decisions, in which way they fall or which side of the ledger they end up on, you know, could help move the market too.
I'm really intrigued, especially in Calgary, obviously, as someone who is in that market. Like I've been thinking, like, okay, they probably don't offload the massive assets to get like a high-end player that's available at the deadline, but I just don't see them not doing anything, right? Like, and I get it. Like you don't want to sacrifice assets. At the same time, like, if you're right there, like in the periphery of the playoff picture, and your goal is to make the playoffs, like, do you not at least try to make like a small move? Do you, I mean, I know
for sure.
Yeah. Like you try to get a player who maybe isn't necessarily a top 6 guy. Maybe he's a top 9 guy. You push him in that top 6 role, like something.
The debate is, how big is the font going to be on the announcement? Like, is it, are we talking one of like the real headliners, like Flames get this guy, or is it going to be more like, well, Flames made a minor move, depth?
I think it'll be more closer to that.
Right. And it probably should be, honestly. Like, that team is just not played well enough to justify pushing more chips in. I don't think. I know it's hard to put your mind around because, you know, we talked about it even before the season began, right? Like we had this idea that maybe it's going to be a tougher regular season and they're more playoff ready. Like, I think that's what you're really gauging. It's not just looking at the standings. I think it's like, were we right about these players? Is having, you know, Kadri in the lineup? I know it's been a really tough year for Huberdeau, but maybe, like, is there some element there that when it flips back to 0 and if they make the playoffs, like, can they have a run in them? Like, that's entirely possible. I think that's what you got to gauge if you're Brad Treliving. It's not so much they need to be at this specific spot in the standings. It's more like, do you believe in the group?
But also to that point, like if you're thinking about it from that point, is it wise to just let them be and they just be like, all right, we'll see what it is? Do you not at least give them something to, okay, let's see if they figure it out. Like at least you made this addition that could help, right? Like I don't know. Like this feels like a unique situation for a team. Yeah,
they don't know what their team is.
I don't think they know either. They
don't. I mean, and that's the issue. And so like that's fascinating because for them, they're maybe don't like that the deadline's in 2 weeks, because 2 weeks, I know the schedule's busy. They're going to see, whatever, 5-6 more games, but it's not that much time before you got to make some big calls. And that's, that's why, that's the pressure on every GM right now is there's big decisions and it's not always a clear answer what the best path forward is.
By the way, they play Detroit tonight. They play the New York Rangers again on Saturday. Next week, they're on a 3-game road trip in Arizona, Vegas, and then Colorado. And then in the days before the deadline, the 2 games they have before, Boston and Toronto. And their first game out of that deadline is against Minnesota. So like, I think it's less of like, oh no, the trade deadline's in 2 weeks. It's, oh no, we have all these tough teams to go up and play against in the 2 weeks. That could either push them out or we really see what the Flames are made of.
That's great, though, in a way. Like, you couldn't ask for better if you're Brad Treliving, because you really get to see them tested against teams that you potentially are going to have to go through in the playoffs, whether it's a Colorado or a Vegas. You're going to see how they react in those environments with, like clearly there's a lot on the line, too. Like, this isn't October anymore. Like, we're seeing some pretty competitive games around the league right now. And so, yeah. Anyway, we didn't have the Flames, but I do think that they're one of the teams for me that it's like, which way does it go? And as I said, Nashville is kind of intriguing to me. Washington, the same. Like those teams that half in, half out. Like which direction do they go? And then, we'll see what the Bostons can do. I mean, if you're Boston, like, how do you improve on this season?
Chychrun, man? If you get Jacob Chychrun this year or some other high impact player, like what are we doing?
Well, you still got to play the games, but yeah, it would be hard to see them being the underdog heading into any series. It's already going to be hard if they don't make one addition. They're going to be the favorite in whoever they play in the wild card seedings. Then let's assume they win that, they're going to play either Toronto or Tampa. Like they're probably the favorite again. What a J word they are. Didn't quite say it though.
CJ.
Let's wrap this up before I get myself in trouble.
Stick taps. Time for stick taps. Want to bet? Then get in on the action at Sports Interaction. Whatever your sport, Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pregame, in-game, or in one of our many unique prop bets. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN, or in Ontario, download the app now by using the QR code at the bottom of the screen. 19 and over, please play responsibly. Do you have a stick tap?
I do. I'm going to add a new wrinkle just for this week, and I'm going to give a hockey hug, not a stick tap, to Alex Ovechkin. Terrible news this week that he lost his father. There's something beautiful about our sport that, like, no one plays it by accident, right? You need someone there to put on your equipment or tie up your skates when you're young, and usually for many years. And so one of my favorite times, if you permit the sort of roundabout way I'm getting to this,
go ahead,
is the night that the cup is won and you're on the ice and you're there with the families and seeing all the emotion that spills out. And I think, obviously anyone who has any success in life usually does so with the backing of strong mentors or parents. But you really see, I think there's something unique in hockey that there's a lot of close bonds there. And obviously Alex had that with his father. Mikhail was a huge part of his life, kind of full circle, eerie almost, just seeing, him having his own son, Sergey, at the All-Star weekend. And the news this week that he's lost his dad is difficult. So I just want to give him a hockey hug. Obviously a lot of people in the sport are thinking about him, and losing a parent at any age is difficult. And I think especially one that had such an impact on his life and his career.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And it's just, my condolences to Alexander Ovechkin and his family going through this tough time. I guess for my stick tap, this is a little bit more recent. I just saw you retweet it as we were doing the show, and I'm trying to just make sure I have this all right as well. But a longtime NHL assistant and one of the few people of color behind an NHL bench, Paul Gerard, has passed away, unfortunately, after a battle with cancer. So I extend a hockey hug to his family as well. This is literally just coming from the team he was with the University of Nebraska Omaha hockey program, just making the announcement. But yeah, we've seen only a handful of black coaches behind a bench, whether it's a Fred Brathwaite, Joel Ward with what he's been doing in the AHL as well, French Jean, Tampa Bay as well, and Paul Gerard, who spent some time. He was with the Calgary Flames actually as an assistant once upon a time. He was also coaching for a handful of teams. So I just want to express my condolences to his family after this sudden loss. This is it's a bit of a sad way to end the podcast, but it's really important that we were able to acknowledge that.
Yeah, gone far too soon, man. 56, just not fair. So it's too bad. Absolutely.
That's going to do it for our show today. We will be back on Saturday with a podcast. I don't know if we're going to we might just keep asking CJ for Monday. That being said, if you want to get your questions in, by all means, please do so, whether on Discord, whether on Twitter. I'm at JK McKenzie. Chris is at Reporter Chris. Get those questions in. Just make sure you use the hashtag AskCJ. On Saturday, trade stuff, more trade stuff. Look.
Spend your weekend with us. Spend your weekend with us. If you come
to the podcast, you know what you signed up for. You're getting trade stuff, especially from One Big Siege.
Carve out a nice little walk. Maybe we'll do a quicker show, a half-hour walk. Come spend some time with us, and I'm pumped. We'll probably do an extra show the next couple of weeks. I mean, this is the time of year we got to strike while the iron's hot. I know everyone's busy, but we'll strike while the iron's hot.
Mix in a water while you can. For CJ, I'm Julian saying so long. Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet?
Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter at Reporter Chris. And follow Julian McKenzie at JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.